But finding no way to bring him in because they went up on the roof and let him down with his bed through the tiles into the midst before Jesus. And when he saw their faith, he said, "Man, your sins are forgiven." And the scribes and the Pharisees began to question, saying to themselves, "Who is this who speaks blasphemy? Who can forgive sins but God alone?" When Jesus perceived their thoughts, he answered them, "What is in your hearts? Which is easier to say, sins are forgiven you, or to say, rise and walk? But that you may know that the Son of Man has authority on earth to forgive sins," he said to the man who was paralyzed, "I say to you, rise, pick up your bed, and go home." And immediately he rose up before them and picked up what he had been laying on and went home, glorifying God. And amazement seized them all, and they glorified God and were filled with awe, saying, "We have seen extraordinary things today." Let's turn over a few pages to Luke chapter 7, verse 1. We'll be reading verses 1 to 10. This is the key passage in my mind. So after he had finished all his sayings in the hearing of the people, he entered Capernaum. Now a centurion had a servant who was sick and at the point of death, who was highly valued by him. When the centurion heard about Jesus, he sent to him elders of the Jews, asking him to come and heal his servant. And when they came to Jesus, they pleaded with him earnestly, saying, "He is worthy you do this for him, for he loves our nation, and he is the one who built us our synagogue." And Jesus went with them. When he was not far from the house, the centurion sent friends, saying to him, "Lord, do not trouble yourself. I am not worthy to have you come under my roof. Therefore, I did not presume to come to you, but say the word." Get this. "Say the word, and let my servant be healed. For I too am a man under authority, with soldiers under me. And I say to one, go, and he goes, and to another, come, and he comes. And to my servant, do this, and he does it." When Jesus heard these things, he marveled at him, and turning to the crowd that followed him, said, "I tell you, not even in Israel have I found such faith." And when those who had been sent returned to the house, they found the servant well. Going into chapter 8, verse 22. And 20 to 25. One day, Jesus got into a boat with his disciples, and he said to them, let us go across to the other side of the lake." So they set out, and as they sailed, he fell asleep. And a windstorm came on the lake, and they were filling with water and were in danger. And they went and woke him, saying, "We are perishing." And he woke and rebuked the wind and the raging waves, and they ceased, and there was a calm. He said to them, "Where's your faith?" And they were afraid and marveled, saying to one another, "Who then is this that he commands even winds and water, and they obey him?" I'm going to drop down just a few verses to chapter 8, verse 40. Jesus has gone back into town. When he returned, the crowd welcomed him, for they were all waiting for him. And there came a man named Jairus, who was a ruler of the synagogue. And falling at Jesus' feet, he implored him to come to his house, for he had an only daughter, about 12 years of age, and she was dying. As Jesus went, the people pressed around him. Have you ever been in a place so crowded that you just basically had to wiggle and shove your way to get through people? This is the image I get when I read these verses. People pressed around him. He's struggling to make his way through this crowd to follow this man to heal Jairus's daughter. That's the picture. People pressed around him, and there was a woman in the crowd who had had a discharge of blood for years, and she all her living on physicians. She could not be healed by anyone. She came up behind him and touched the fringe of his garment. Immediately, her discharge of blood ceased. And Jesus said, "Who is it that touched me?" All crammed in there. And then the next line, this is really interesting. They all denied it. Peter said, "Master, the crowds surround you and are pressing in on you." But Jesus said, "Someone touched me, for I perceive that power has gone out from me." And when the woman saw that she was not hidden, she came trembling and falling down before him, declared in the presence of all the people why she had touched him and how she had been immediately healed. And he said to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace." While he was still speaking, someone from the ruler's house came and said, your daughter is dead. Do not trouble the teacher anymore." But Jesus, on hearing this, answered him, "Do not fear, only believe, and she will be well." And when he came to the house, he allowed no one to enter with him except Peter and John and James and the father and mother of the child. All were weeping and mourning for her, but he said, "Do not weep, for she is not dead, but sleep." And they laughed at him, knowing that she was dead. But taking her by the hand, he called, saying, "Child, arise." And her spirit returned, and she got up at once, and he directed that something should be given to her to eat. And her parents were amazed, but he charged them not to tell anyone what had happened. Now, let's go into the first few verses of chapter 9. Some interesting things have happened here with Jesus' power and his authority. He's calmed a storm. He's forgiven sins. He's healed a wise man, healed a woman who had been bleeding and spent all her money and has a hopeless case of and could not be healed, but he healed her. And a child who had died was raised to life. So amazing things have happened because of his power. Now listen to what it says in chapter 9, verses 1-6. He called the 12 together. He'd already chosen the 12 apostles. He calls the 12 together and gave them power and authority over all demons and to cure diseases. And he sent them out to proclaim the kingdom of God and to heal. And he said to them, "Take nothing for your journey, no staff, nor bag, nor bread, nor money, and do not have 2 tunics. And whatever house you enter, stay there, and from there depart. And wherever they do not receive you, you leave that town. Shake off the dust from your feet as a testimony against them." And they departed and went through the villages, preaching the gospel and healing everywhere.